The alien princess mocked his armor. Until he removed it, the city of Zarathia hung above the swirling clouds of its gas giant like a jewel on a velvet sky. Towers of crystalline light reflected the suns that bathed the floating metropolis in colors no human eye had ever seen. Streets moved, almost alive, with shimmering energy paths where hovercrafts glided effortlessly between elegant platforms. It was a city of beauty, precision, and tradition, where every citizen followed strict codes of conduct, and every noble walked with the certainty of superiority. Among these nobles moved Princess Lysera, the daughter of the ruling house. She was a vision of grace, her lithe figure draped in flowing robes of translucent colors, patterns shimmering and shifting with her movements. Her violet eyes seemed to see beyond the surface, into intentions and secrets, though she usually chose to play with them. Lysera was known for her wit, her sharp tongue, and a sense of amusement that could unsettle anyone who stepped too far into her court. She delighted in testing visitors from distant worlds, especially humans. To her, humans were quaint, sometimes clever, but often crude and clumsy. She had heard of Earth's brave attempts to reach the stars, but to her, those attempts often seemed like children playing with toys far beyond their understanding. Today, however, she would have a visitor unlike any before, a human diplomat named Marcus Hale, chosen to represent Earth in what was expected to be a brief diplomatic mission. Marcus was not tall, but his presence was commanding. He had the calm, steady eyes of someone used to pressure, and the careful posture of a man trained to observe before acting. He wore the human armor issued for diplomatic and ceremonial purposes, a bulky, silver suit designed more for protection than elegance. Its joints creaked slightly with each step, and its surface gleamed under the twin suns of Zarathia. To Marcus, the armor was not about style. It was about safety. In alien societies, appearances could be misleading, and the consequences of misreading intentions could be fatal. The first moments Marcus stepped onto the crystal platforms of Zarathia were a mixture of awe and subtle panic. The platforms shimmered beneath his feet, shifting slightly with the weight of the crowd, and the air was thick with scents unfamiliar to human senses. He saw creatures of every imaginable form, some with translucent skin, some with multiple limbs, and some whose very presence seemed to ripple the light around them. He was a stranger in a dazzling world. Princess Lysera spotted him immediately. Her violet eyes narrowed as she studied the human. He moved cautiously, adjusting the joints of his cumbersome armor, and his helmet reflected her gaze back at her. She raised an eyebrow and whispered to her attendant, her voice carrying a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Look at that armor, clunky, stiff, and yet he dares to enter our city as if he belongs." Her attendant giggled softly, aware of the courtly game the princess enjoyed playing. The ceremony to welcome Marcus was elaborate. Zarathian diplomats lined the grand hall, their robes flowing like liquid light. The air vibrated with the subtle energy of their ceremonial instruments, a harmonic resonance that humans could barely hear. Marcus followed protocol as best he could, bowing when appropriate, keeping his hands at his sides, and letting his armor's weight remind him of the importance of composure. Yet every movement drew subtle murmurs from the nobles. The creak of metal, the slight clanking with each step, the faint reflection of lights off polished silver. It all marked him as alien, odd, and, in the eyes of the court, amusing. Lysera's amusement grew as she watched him struggle with the smallest of obstacles. A narrow corridor forced Marcus to twist his body in awkward angles. A platform edge required him to carefully step, mindful of his armor's limited flexibility. Each time, Lysera's lips curved into a sly smile, the kind that could chill the confidence of even the bravest visitor. She leaned slightly forward, eyes glinting, and remarked aloud, though with a theatrical tone to ensure all could hear, "Truly, humans excel in many things, yet grace is clearly not one of them." Laughter rippled softly through the assembled nobles, though some restrained, themselves aware of Lysera's capricious nature. Marcus caught her remark but did not reply. He knew that confrontation with her wit would be unwise. In alien diplomacy, words could be weapons sharper than any blade. Instead, he focused on maintaining his composure, keeping his head high, and letting his actions speak, even if they were small gestures. Holding doors, moving carefully to avoid knocking delicate instruments, offering respectful bows where required. Yet inside, he felt the tension of being under scrutiny. One misstep could ruin not only his personal mission, but also Earth's reputation. By midday, Marcus had been through the ceremonial parade, several formal greetings, and a tour of the city's central council chambers. His armor, once a shield, now felt cumbersome and restrictive. Heat built up inside, and the joints ached from constant bending. Yet he did not complain. Every step, every careful movement was a demonstration of discipline, a quiet testament to human resilience. Lysera, watching from above on her raised platform, began to notice this. Beneath the clumsy exterior, there was a rhythm to his movements, a consistency and thoughtfulness that hinted at intelligence, patience, and endurance. Lunch was a formal affair in the palace. Tables floated slightly above the floor, held by unseen energy fields. Delicate dishes, translucent and shimmering, were served, each infused with subtle flavors that Marcus could barely identify. He followed the etiquette as best as he could, mimicking the motions of alien hands with his armored fingers. Every mistake was noted by Lysera. When Marcus accidentally knocked a small crystalline cup, it rolled gracefully to the floor without breaking, and the princess's lips twitched in the faintest smirk. After the meal, Lysera decided to introduce a more personal test. She invited Marcus to a demonstration hall, where alien warriors performed traditional ceremonial drills. "If you wish to impress, human," she said with a glint in her eyes, "you must show us not only your strength but your understanding of rhythm, precision, and patience." The hall was vast, its floor marked with intricate light patterns that changed with each step the performers took. Marcus observed quietly as alien warriors moved with astonishing grace, their limbs flowing like liquid light, perfectly synchronized. When it was his turn, Marcus stepped onto the floor. His armor clanked slightly, drawing soft chuckles from the audience. The patterns beneath his feet shifted, highlighting every misstep. Yet Marcus adapted quickly. He observed the movements of the aliens, imitated their rhythm as best he could, and used his human ingenuity to compensate for his limitations. Where his joints could not move as fluidly, he anticipated and adjusted his steps. Where his balance was challenged, he leveraged the armor's weight to steady himself. Lysera's amusement gave way to curiosity. She had expected a human to stumble and fail, but Marcus's approach was neither reckless nor foolish. He was learning, adapting, and facing a world designed to intimidate him with calm determination. Her eyes, once sharp with mockery, softened slightly as she studied him. There was a different kind of strength in this human, a strength that did not rely on appearance or elegance, but on persistence, observation, and careful action. The day ended with a quiet moment overlooking the city. Marcus stood on a balcony, removing his helmet for the first time in public. His dark hair was tousled, and his skin bore the faint sheen of sweat from the effort of navigating the city in restrictive armor. Lysera approached silently, standing beside him. For the first time, she saw him not as a suit of metal, but as a person. There was an honesty in his posture, a directness in his gaze that the courtiers could never imitate. "You are not like the others," she said softly, more to herself than to him. Marcus glanced at her, curious, but said nothing. Lysera's expression was unreadable, but her eyes reflected a mix of amusement, intrigue, and something she had rarely allowed herself to feel: respect. For Marcus, it was a small victory. He had survived his first day in the alien capital without embarrassment, maintained his composure under ridicule, and begun to show that humans could not be easily dismissed. For Lysera, it was the beginning of a shift in perspective, a realization that perhaps there was more to this human than a clunky suit of silver armor. The princess, ever proud and cautious, would have to decide if she was willing to acknowledge this new understanding publicly, a decision that could ripple across the halls of Zarathia and challenge centuries of tradition. As night fell over the gas giant, the city shimmered with countless lights. Marcus returned to his quarters, feeling both exhaustion and a quiet satisfaction. He knew the days ahead would be far more challenging. The princess had already set trials, tests, and games to gauge him, and the alien court would watch every step he took. Yet, for the first time, he felt that he might not only survive here but earn a place in a world that seemed designed to mock him. Meanwhile, Lysera lingered on her platform, gazing at the distant human city he had left behind, wondering what resilience, cleverness, and courage meant in the context of beings so different from her own. She realized that appearances could be deceiving, that armor might hide weakness, and that true strength might be something far more subtle, something Marcus had already begun to show. By the end of the first day, the stage was set. The human had entered a world of beauty, tradition, and subtle cruelty, and had survived. The princess had mocked, judged, and observed, and unknowingly had begun to respect. The journey ahead would test both of them in ways neither could yet imagine. And in the heart of the floating city, under the alien suns, a quiet story of courage, intelligence, and the breaking of assumptions had begun. The morning sun of Zarathia rose over the floating city, scattering rays of gold and violet across the crystalline towers. Marcus Hale woke in his assigned quarters, the soft hum of the energy fields beneath the city vibrating faintly through the walls. The armor he had worn yesterday still hung on a stand, polished and gleaming, but Marcus did not feel the need to wear it yet. He had learned something important. Sometimes strength came not from protection, but from understanding the environment and the people in it. Outside his window, Princess Lysera walked across the terraces above the city. She had not left Marcus alone. Even in the quiet of dawn, she observed him. Her mind was alive with curiosity. He had survived his first day in a court that prided itself on elegance, intelligence, and wit, and he had done so without faltering. That human composure, the subtle intelligence behind his movements, fascinated her. She wondered what other surprises he might bring. Marcus's first task of the day was a meeting with the Zarathian Council. This was a group of elders, advisors, and strategists, all moving with precise movements and careful expressions. They spoke in a melodic language that Marcus had only begun to understand, relying heavily on translators embedded in his helmet's interface. Today, he would negotiate terms of trade, cultural exchange, and mutual exploration. It was a test of diplomacy and patience, both of which humans had in abundance when circumstances demanded. As Marcus entered the council chamber, Lysera followed discreetly, standing behind a decorative column that allowed her to observe without being immediately noticed. The chamber was vast, circular, and lined with floating platforms that moved gracefully in the air. Counselors hovered lightly above the floor, their robes shifting with every movement, creating an effect of perpetual motion. Marcus bowed politely, acknowledging the protocol, and began the discussion. The Zarathian Council immediately questioned him about Earth's technology, resources, and military capabilities. Marcus answered with careful honesty, never exaggerating but never yielding the impression that humans were weak. The aliens were quick to mock anything that seemed crude or primitive. When one counselor asked about human armor, Marcus described it matter-of-factly. The council snickered softly at the clunky design compared to their own flowing, adaptive suits. Lysera, leaning slightly forward from her hiding spot, stifled a laugh. The humans' reliance on bulk and metal seemed ridiculous to her people. Marcus did not flinch. He calmly explained the reasoning behind Earth's armor: protection in unpredictable environments, versatility for multiple terrains, and the ability to withstand extreme temperatures. He pointed out that humans had survived conditions far harsher than anything the Zarathians could imagine: deserts that burned like molten glass, oceans that could swallow cities, and storms that flattened forests. His voice was steady, and the facts carried weight. Even Lysera felt a flicker of respect. He was not merely defensive, but confident in a subtle, quiet way. After the council meeting, Lysera decided to escalate the challenge. She arranged for Marcus to participate in a series of trials designed to test his adaptability, intelligence, and composure under pressure. The first was a physical trial, a zero-gravity obstacle course suspended above the city, designed for creatures with 6 or more limbs. Marcus's human body was at a disadvantage. His 2 arms and legs could not replicate the elegant, flowing motions of the aliens, and his armor added weight that made each movement more difficult. Despite the disadvantage, Marcus adapted. He studied the obstacles carefully, noting the shifting platforms, energy fields, and floating barriers. Instead of trying to mimic alien movements, he relied on human ingenuity. He used momentum, leverage, and careful timing to navigate the course. When a rotating energy barrier threatened to knock him off, he leapt at the right moment, using the armor's weight to stabilize himself against the push. The audience gasped quietly at his unexpected skill, including Lysera. Her amusement was replaced with intrigue. He was not failing, as she expected, but improvising and overcoming in ways that no alien courtier would have anticipated. The second trial was a test of observation and memory. Marcus was shown a series of alien artifacts, some ancient, some modern, each with complex patterns and subtle energy signatures. He was asked to memorize their positions, forms, and functions. Lysera had expected him to struggle with these alien symbols, but Marcus relied on human logic and pattern recognition. He organized the information in his mind systematically, creating mental connections between shape, color, and energy. By the end of the trial, he had correctly identified every artifact and explained their functions with clarity. The princess's eyes widened slightly. Even the council murmured in approval. This human had skill beyond mere physicality. The final trial of the day was a test of etiquette. Marcus was invited to a banquet attended by dozens of alien nobles. The table floated slightly above the floor, as it had yesterday, and delicate dishes hovered before each guest. The aliens ate with synchronized, precise motions, and every action had meaning. Marcus had to follow their movements without breaking protocol, a nearly impossible task for a human unfamiliar with their gestures. At first, Marcus stumbled. He knocked a floating dish slightly with his armored elbow. Lysera stifled a laugh, her hand covering her mouth. But Marcus did not panic. He observed the pattern, corrected his motion, and adapted. Within moments, he was moving with a rhythm that matched the alien's grace, not perfectly, but respectfully. His efforts were noticed, and soon whispers of admiration spread among the nobles. The princess, usually quick to mock, found herself silently impressed. This human was not only surviving but learning rapidly. By the end of the trials, Marcus was exhausted. His armor felt heavier than ever, and sweat dampened his hair beneath the helmet. Yet he had succeeded in every challenge, not by being alien, but by being human. Lysera approached him quietly, waiting for the court to disperse before speaking. "You are unlike any human I have ever encountered," she said softly. "Most would have failed, stumbled, or fled. You have perseverance and something else, an ability to think when others would panic." Marcus gave a slight nod, acknowledging her words. No pride, no arrogance, just a calm understanding that the challenges were part of his purpose here. Lysera studied him further, noticing the subtle confidence in his movements, the way he adjusted naturally to environments designed to be uncomfortable, the steady gaze that seemed to measure everything without judgment. He was not just surviving, he was demonstrating qualities her society often overlooked: intelligence, courage, adaptability, and quiet strength. The next challenge came unexpectedly. A sudden alert from the city's security network indicated an intruder attempting to infiltrate the palace grounds. Marcus was immediately directed to assist. Despite the cumbersome armor, he moved with surprising speed and precision. The intruder turned out to be a small group attempting sabotage, hoping to embarrass the human visitor. Marcus quickly assessed the situation, using the environment to his advantage. He guided palace security with clear, simple commands, and even used the energy barriers in the hall to trap the intruders temporarily. Lysera observed from a balcony, astonished. Marcus's human intuition and decisiveness had a tangible effect. He had not only protected himself, but also safeguarded the palace and its inhabitants. She realized that her amusement and mockery had blinded her to the very essence of what made him exceptional. Strength did not always come from flowing robes, floating grace, or polished appearances. Sometimes it came from sharp observation, quick thinking, and a calm heart under pressure. After the incident, the council gathered to discuss Marcus's performance. For the first time, there were no snickers, no mockery, only a quiet acknowledgement that this human had exceeded expectations. Lysera remained silent during the discussions, choosing instead to observe Marcus as he interacted with the counselors. She noted his patience, his ability to remain polite under pressure, and his capacity to adapt when circumstances changed. It was a rare display of skill in a society that prized appearance over action. As evening fell over the floating city, Marcus walked alongside Lysera on the terrace above the central towers. The twin suns set in brilliant streaks of gold and violet, reflecting in the crystalline structures below. Marcus removed his helmet for the first time that day, letting the alien winds brush against his face. Lysera's expression softened slightly, a rare moment of vulnerability in her otherwise commanding demeanor. "You are resilient, human," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Most would have collapsed under the scrutiny and trials, yet you adapt, survive, and even succeed." Marcus glanced at her, studying her subtle expression. "I am learning," he replied simply. "Every place has its rules, its dangers. I cannot ignore them." Lysera tilted her head, considering his words. There was honesty in his statement, a quiet intelligence that resonated with her own desire to understand strength beyond appearances. The night ended with a quiet understanding. Marcus had earned a measure of respect, though unspoken, from the princess and the council. He had navigated trials designed to humiliate him, adapted to alien protocols, and even displayed leadership under unexpected danger. Lysera, in turn, had begun to see that humans were capable of more than she had assumed. As Marcus returned to his quarters, the city of Zarathia shimmered beneath him, lights reflecting in the swirling clouds. He knew the challenges were only beginning. The princess would test him further, and the court would continue to watch, waiting for any misstep. Yet he felt a quiet confidence. He had survived, adapted, and earned respect. That was more than many humans or aliens could claim in such a world. In her chambers, Lysera gazed out at the same city, her thoughts turning over and over. Marcus had entered her world in clumsy armor, awkward and unfamiliar, yet he had managed to navigate it with grace of his own kind. She realized that the trials she had designed were not just tests for him, they were lessons for her as well. Perhaps she had underestimated the value of different kinds of strength, the courage it took to stand unflinching in a world that mocked you at every turn. By the end of the second day, the stage was set for what was to come. Marcus would face further tests, greater challenges and dangers that even his ingenuity could not fully predict. Lysera, meanwhile, would watch, learn, and perhaps begin to question the rigid ways of her society. The human had arrived, and in his wake, the city of Zarathia would never see the concept of strength the same way again. The following morning, the city of Zarathia shone in a crisp, pale light. Crystalline towers sparkled as the twin suns rose, casting long reflections across the floating platforms. Marcus Hale walked through the city with a quiet focus. His armor, though polished and shining, felt heavier than ever, not just physically, but as a symbol of the weight of expectations placed upon him. Today, he knew, the trials would grow more demanding. Princess Lysera had not forgotten the subtle victories of the previous day. Her curiosity had grown into a challenge of its own, to see how far a human could push his endurance, intelligence, and composure in a world so foreign. The first task of the day was an outdoor exercise in the central plaza. Marcus arrived to find a complex course laid out, combining both physical and mental obstacles. Floating barriers shifted unpredictably, energy fields buzzed with sharp resonance, and holographic puzzles appeared intermittently, demanding logic and attention to detail. Lysera stood at the edge of the plaza, observing with that familiar sharpness, her violet eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and intrigue. "Today, human, you will face not only challenges of the body but also of the mind," she said, her voice carrying easily across the plaza. "You may find that your armor, which seems so useful, could become a hindrance." Her tone was light, but Marcus knew this was no empty warning. He took a deep breath, centering himself. The first barrier was a floating platform maze, each section shifting slightly with each step. Humans were not built for sudden, weightless changes, and the armor limited his flexibility. Yet Marcus did not panic. He observed the patterns, noted the timing, and moved deliberately. When a platform rotated unexpectedly, threatening to unbalance him, he adjusted his stance and used the armor's weight to counter the motion. Every step, every leap, required both careful calculation and instinct. Lysera watched closely, her initial smirk slowly fading. Marcus was not failing, nor was he merely surviving. He was adapting, thinking quickly, and adjusting to circumstances in ways her alien courtiers rarely did. His approach was not graceful in their eyes, but it was effective, and that effectiveness carried a quiet power. After the maze, Marcus approached a series of energy puzzles suspended in midair. Each puzzle required him to connect floating nodes in specific sequences, some shifting faster than the human eye could track. Alien onlookers whispered, expecting failure. Marcus paused, observing the patterns carefully. He recognized a logic inherent in the sequences, patterns repeated at intervals, subtle clues embedded in light shifts. Using these observations, he solved the puzzles with methodical precision, his hands steady despite the cumbersome armor. Lysera's curiosity intensified. Humans, she had assumed, relied primarily on brute strength or chaotic luck. Marcus, however, demonstrated patience, calculation, and adaptability. He was a creature shaped for survival in environments far harsher than Zarathia, and in a court obsessed with elegance, these qualities were beginning to shine in unexpected ways. By midday, Marcus was led to the next trial, a demonstration of diplomacy and negotiation. Lysera had invited a group of alien traders and nobles, some friendly, some subtly hostile, each with their own agendas. Marcus's task was to mediate a dispute over trade rights between two influential factions. He had no prior knowledge of Zarathian commerce beyond what he had learned in briefings. The challenge was more than intellectual. It required reading intent, assessing risk, and managing delicate egos. He began by listening carefully, asking clarifying questions, and summarizing each point succinctly. His calm demeanor, patience, and logical approach surprised the factions. In moments where alien pride could have caused escalation, Marcus's words diffused tension, finding solutions acceptable to both parties. Lysera, observing from a balcony, noted his ability to balance firmness with diplomacy, a balance her society rarely saw executed by outsiders. When the negotiation concluded, the factions expressed cautious approval, though some nobles grumbled quietly about a human daring to intervene. Lysera descended from her perch, her presence commanding attention. "You have handled the negotiations with a skill that is unusual for your kind," she said. Marcus inclined his head politely. "I am learning," he replied simply, the words steady and sincere. Lysera's lips curved into the faintest smile. That single, honest acknowledgement of learning, rather than arrogance, seemed to mark a turning point in her perception. The afternoon brought the final trial, a survival exercise in the palace gardens. The gardens of Zarathia were vast, layered terraces filled with alien flora, each plant sensitive to touch and capable of releasing subtle chemical signals. Marcus was instructed to navigate the garden to retrieve a symbolic object without triggering any alarms set to detect intrusion. The exercise was designed to test perception, adaptability, and composure under pressure. Marcus moved carefully, noting the glow of plants that changed with the angle of the sun and the soft hum of energy fields beneath the soil. He adjusted his movements, using balance, careful timing, and spatial awareness rather than relying on brute strength. When a pressure-sensitive path threatened to trigger an alarm, he sidestepped using a narrow ledge, his eyes scanning every movement in the garden. The armor made each step slightly harder, yet it did not slow him in spirit. He treated the restrictions as part of the challenge, integrating them into his strategy. Lysera watched, fascinated. Marcus was not just performing tasks. He was learning, adapting, and thinking in ways that her society had not taught. In Zarathia, failure was often fatal in complex exercises, and success required conformity to predetermined patterns. Marcus, however, created his own solutions, relying on logic, intuition, and careful observation. His ingenuity was undeniable. At the heart of the garden, Marcus found the symbolic object, a small crystalline sphere glowing with soft internal light. He reached for it carefully, respecting the delicate flora, and returned along the safest path he had calculated. When he presented it to Lysera, she observed his calm expression, steady hands, and unwavering gaze. For the first time, the princess's amusement mixed with admiration. She saw a human who could endure, think, and act decisively in an alien world, qualities her own court often took for granted. The day's trials concluded with a quiet moment. Marcus stood beside Lysera on a balcony overlooking the garden, his armor gleaming in the sunset. "You have exceeded my expectations," Lysera said quietly, not as a ruler to a subordinate, but as a peer acknowledging an equal. Marcus's response was modest. "I am only trying to understand your world. Strength comes in many forms, not just elegance or tradition." Her violet eyes softened, a rare warmth breaking through her usual sharpness. Evening fell, casting the city in hues of gold and violet once more. The lights of the floating platforms reflected on the low clouds, creating a sea of shimmering color. Marcus walked back to his quarters, feeling both exhaustion and quiet satisfaction. He had faced physical, mental, and diplomatic trials, and had survived every challenge by remaining calm, observing, and adapting. The armor had been both a tool and a limitation, but he had learned to use it wisely. Lysera, meanwhile, remained on the balcony, contemplating the human's abilities. She had mocked him when he first arrived, imagining a clumsy, inferior creature. Now she saw the truth. Humans were capable of resilience, cleverness, and courage that defied her expectations. She realized that strength was not always visible, not always elegant, and not always celebrated by tradition. Marcus embodied qualities that her society often overlooked, and she could not ignore the impression he had made. As night settled over Zarathia, the city's lights sparkled like stars, and a quiet understanding formed between princess and human. Marcus had survived trials designed to test his weaknesses, adapted to alien systems with ingenuity, and demonstrated courage in moments that could have been disastrous. Lysera had learned to see beyond appearances, realizing that intelligence, perseverance, and calm under pressure were perhaps the greatest forms of strength. The princess retired to her chambers, but sleep eluded her. She replayed the day's events in her mind, considering the implications of Marcus's success. A human had entered her world, unfamiliar and awkward in appearance, yet he had navigated it with skill, intelligence, and courage. She wondered how far he might go, how much further he could surprise her, and what it might mean for her own understanding of power, respect, and the value of unexpected allies. Marcus, too, lay awake in his quarters, thinking ahead. He knew the coming days would present greater challenges. Lysera's tests were far from over, and the court would continue to scrutinize every step he took. Yet he felt a quiet confidence, strengthened not by armor or appearance but by experience, adaptability, and his own ability to remain calm under pressure. The trials had begun as a challenge of skill and endurance, but he realized they were also a test of trust, perception, and mutual understanding, qualities humans excelled at in ways that alien societies rarely anticipated. By the end of the second day of trials, a subtle shift had occurred. Marcus had demonstrated not only human resilience, but also ingenuity, composure, and diplomacy. Lysera had begun to see him in a new light, questioning the assumptions she had held about humans and the nature of strength. The stage was set for further trials, deeper tests, and the growing bond of mutual respect that neither of them could yet fully understand. The morning light of Zarathia filtered through the crystal towers, scattering fragments of gold and violet across the city. The air hummed with quiet energy, alive with movement and anticipation. Marcus Hale prepared himself for another day of trials, knowing that Lysera's challenges were far from over. Yesterday had tested his adaptability, intelligence, and composure, but today promised something different. Today, the princess intended to test not only his skill, but his courage and his ability to act under pressure in ways that no simulation could prepare him for. Lysera observed Marcus from a balcony above the palace gardens, her violet eyes narrowing in thought. She had watched him excel in obstacle courses, solve intricate puzzles, and navigate alien diplomacy with patience and insight. Yet she still found herself wondering whether this human's resilience would hold when confronted with real danger, when the stakes were more than ceremonial. Her amusement had shifted to intrigue, and now a faint undercurrent of respect stirred in her chest, something she rarely allowed herself to feel for any outsider. The day began with a summons to the palace's outer district, a vast expanse of platforms suspended above the clouds, where alien technology and natural elements intertwined. Here, Lysera had orchestrated a series of scenarios designed to test Marcus's problem-solving and leadership under unpredictable circumstances. As he arrived, he noticed a gathering of alien citizens, some observing curiously, others skeptical, all waiting to see how the human would fare under pressure. The first challenge was deceptively simple. Marcus was asked to navigate a network of shifting bridges that spanned gaps between platforms. Each bridge moved independently, some rotating slowly, others vibrating with energy that threatened to destabilize anyone who crossed. The court expected failure, imagining a human stumbling, panicking, or retreating. Yet Marcus approached methodically. He paused to observe each bridge's rhythm, calculated the distance, and adjusted his footing with careful precision. His armor, while cumbersome, he used strategically, shifting weight to counterbalance sudden tilts. Lysera watched silently, her usual smirk replaced by a measured interest. Marcus moved with patience and clarity, neither rushed nor fearful, adapting to each bridge as though it were a puzzle rather than a trial. He did not attempt to imitate the aliens' fluid, graceful movements. He relied on his own strengths, logic, observation, and timing. When he reached the final bridge, the observers erupted in quiet murmurs of surprise. Even the most critical nobles could not deny the human's effectiveness. After crossing the bridges, Marcus was led to the next phase, a test of negotiation under pressure. A disagreement had been staged between two alien merchant families over trade agreements, with each party exaggerating claims and testing the limits of the palace's mediation protocols. Marcus's task was to resolve the dispute without resorting to alien ritual or authority, relying instead on calm reasoning and communication. He began by listening carefully, letting each faction present their case fully. Then he asked precise, clarifying questions, demonstrating both attention to detail and fairness. The merchants, initially skeptical and dismissive of a human-s interference, found themselves adjusting their tone in response to his clarity. Marcus proposed solutions that balanced both sides' interests, showing flexibility and fairness. Slowly, the tension in the room eased. By the end, the dispute was resolved without conflict, and Marcus's calm decisiveness earned nods of approval. Lysera, observing from above, felt a subtle shift. This human, who had been mocked for his armor and perceived clumsiness, was proving qualities her society often overlooked: insight, composure, and practical wisdom. By midday, the palace announced an emergency drill, but this time, the danger was real. A small group of rogue operatives had infiltrated the city, exploiting a lapse in the outer security fields. They were armed with energy weapons and devices designed to destabilize the palace's protective systems. Marcus was summoned immediately, his armor already in place. This was no simulation. This was a test of instinct, courage, and action under life-threatening conditions. Marcus assessed the situation calmly. The intruders moved quickly, attempting to divide the palace guards and create chaos. Marcus did not hesitate. He coordinated the guards, directing them strategically, using both the environment and his knowledge of human tactics. When one intruder approached a control panel that could disable energy fields, Marcus intervened, using the armor's weight and protective capabilities to block the attack while neutralizing the threat. Lysera observed in astonishment. The human's actions were not only effective but fearless. He was acting decisively, thinking on his feet, and adapting to each change in real time. His armor, once mocked for its clumsiness, became a tool that enhanced his strength and allowed him to protect others. Marcus moved among the chaos like a conductor, orchestrating defense with clarity and courage. When the intruders were finally subdued, the palace erupted in quiet applause. Guards and officials acknowledged Marcus's quick thinking, his leadership, and his bravery. Lysera descended to the scene, walking alongside Marcus as the threat was neutralized. "You acted with courage beyond expectation," she said, her voice calm yet charged with sincerity. "Few in my city would have responded with such clarity or composure. Few would have thought so quickly under pressure." Marcus simply nodded. "I am trained to observe, adapt, and act when necessary," he said quietly. "Every life matters, and hesitation can be costly." The princess regarded him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. For the first time, she saw him as more than a visitor or a subject of amusement. He was a human who understood responsibility, consequence, and the weight of choices in a world far different from his own. She realized that her mockery of his armor, once a source of entertainment, had been superficial. The human beneath the metal had qualities her society often undervalued: resilience, quick thinking, and courage rooted in practicality rather than spectacle. After the crisis, Marcus was invited to a private discussion with Lysera. They walked along the palace terraces, overlooking the city as the twin suns cast long, shimmering reflections across the towers. "You have shown qualities rarely seen in my world," Lysera said softly. "Patience, courage, ingenuity, yet I wonder, do you always carry such composure even under mortal threat?" Marcus considered her question. "I have learned that panic does not save anyone. Observation, understanding, and action, these are what matter. One must remain steady to protect oneself and others." Lysera studied him carefully. "You are unlike any human I expected," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. Your armor may have seemed clumsy, your movements awkward, but beneath it there is strength. Not just physical, but in thought and heart. Marcus remained modest. Thank you, Princess. I am only trying to act wisely in your world to understand it and respect it. Strength comes in many forms, and each world teaches its own lessons. As evening approached, a celebration was held in the palace gardens, not for the trials, but to honor the successful response to the intrusion. Marcus stood among alien nobles, still clad in armor, but now his presence carried authority rather than amusement. Lysera walked beside him, her expression calm yet thoughtful. She could see the admiration of her people, the respect Marcus had earned not through appearance or ceremony but through action, intelligence, and courage. Later, in private, Lysera reflected on the day. Marcus had entered her world clumsily, mocked by tradition, and yet he had adapted, survived, and excelled. He had faced challenges that would have overwhelmed most, acted decisively in real danger, and demonstrated qualities that her society often took for granted. She realized that strength and heroism were not defined by elegance, ritual, or outward appearances, but by the ability to endure, to think, and to act with courage and integrity. Marcus, too, reflected on the day as he returned to his quarters. He knew the challenges were not over. Lysera's curiosity and the court's scrutiny would continue. Yet he felt a quiet confidence, strengthened not by armor alone but by experience, adaptation, and his own ability to remain calm and observant under pressure. He had earned not only respect but understanding, a rare and valuable achievement in an alien world. That night, the city shimmered beneath the stars, the floating towers reflecting the soft glow of the twin suns as they set. Lysera stood on her balcony, looking out over the city and the distant clouds, thinking of the human who had entered her world so awkwardly yet impressed her so profoundly. She realized that appearances could be deceiving, that tradition could blind judgment, and that courage and intelligence were qualities that transcended species. Marcus had shown her a new perspective on strength, one that her society rarely acknowledged, and she could not help but wonder what he might do next. As sleep approached, both the princess and the human understood that the trials were far from over. Marcus would face further challenges, perhaps even dangers beyond his imagination. Lysera would continue to observe, test, and perhaps, in her own way, learn from him. The bond of respect and understanding between them was quietly forming, subtle but undeniable, and it promised to shape the days to come. By the end of this fourth day, the stage was set for the climax of their journey. Marcus had survived every test, demonstrated courage, intelligence, and adaptability, and gained the quiet respect of a princess who had once mocked him. The next trials would not only test their skills and wits, but would bring them face to face with a moment that could change both their perceptions of strength, honor, and trust forever. The day dawned over Zarathia with a quiet brilliance, the twin suns scattering streams of gold. And violet across the crystal towers. Marcus Hale stood on a terrace overlooking the floating city, taking in the shimmering platforms and delicate bridges that connected the towers. Today, he knew, would be the most significant challenge yet. The trials had tested his endurance, intelligence, and courage, but Lysera had been planning a final test, one that would not rely on ceremony, puzzles, or combat alone. Today, she would see if he could transcend expectations and demonstrate qualities that defined true leadership and humanity. Princess Lysera approached him quietly, her violet eyes steady, her usual playful smirk softened into something more serious. She had watched Marcus for days, observing his responses to obstacles, puzzles, diplomacy, and real danger. Each time he had proven himself, yet today, she intended to push him further beyond the structured trials, into the unpredictable and uncontrollable. She wanted to see whether the human could act decisively when outcomes were uncertain, when lives hung in the balance, and when the elegance of Zarathia's court offered no guidance. The challenge began when a sudden alert rippled across the city. A nearby research facility had suffered a catastrophic energy surge, threatening to explode and endanger several platforms above the clouds. Citizens were evacuating, and automated security systems struggled to contain the instability. The palace directed Marcus to assist, knowing that his unique combination of human ingenuity, calm composure, and practical courage could make a difference. Marcus moved quickly, assessing the situation with the careful eyes of someone trained to act under pressure. The facility was a network of delicate energy conduits, floating platforms, and unstable machinery. A single wrong step could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. Alien engineers scrambled, their nervous movements reflecting the panic of a system designed for perfection but unprepared for chaos. Marcus immediately identified the priority: stabilize the energy conduits, protect personnel, and prevent collateral damage. Lysera followed from a safe distance, observing as Marcus coordinated the response. He directed engineers, adjusted energy flows, and moved along unstable platforms with a precision that combined careful calculation with instinctive reaction. His armor, once the subject of ridicule, now became a tool, absorbing minor impacts and allowing him to push past unstable sections without hesitation. Citizens watched in awe as the human navigated the chaos, calm, confident, and decisive. At one critical moment, a support beam beneath a platform began to fail. A young alien technician stood frozen, unable to move without triggering a chain reaction. Marcus calculated the timing, extended a steady hand, and guided the technician to safety while simultaneously securing the failing beam. The subtle grace of his movements, adapted to his human form, allowed him to act where many aliens could not. Lysera's eyes widened, a mixture of astonishment and admiration. The human she had once mocked was performing feats of courage and intelligence that even her society struggled to match. The energy surge threatened to cascade further. Marcus identified a core conduit that needed immediate intervention. He climbed to the central platform, assessing the complex machinery, and realized that the only way to prevent disaster was to manually recalibrate the flow of energy, a risky action that could injure him or even destroy the platform if performed incorrectly. Yet Marcus remained calm. He adjusted the controls with steady hands, analyzing feedback in real time, predicting shifts and compensating for them. The core stabilized, the dangerous surge dissipated, and the immediate threat was neutralized. Citizens cheered quietly, engineers expressed gratitude, and even some nobles who had doubted him looked on with newfound respect. Lysera approached him directly as the last stabilization measures were implemented. You have exceeded every expectation," she said, her voice soft but filled with genuine respect. "Most beings would have panicked or hesitated. You acted decisively with skill, intelligence, and courage. You have saved lives today, human." Marcus nodded modestly. "I acted to protect them. Panic does not solve problems. Understanding, observation, and action do. That is the strength I have learned to rely upon." Lysera's eyes glimmered with a mixture of admiration and realization. The princess took a deep breath and gestured toward the city below. "When you first arrived, I mocked your armor, your movements, your presence. I assumed humans were crude, awkward, and inferior. I was wrong. You have shown strength beyond appearance, courage beyond expectation, and intelligence that adapts to any situation. You have changed my perspective, not just of humans, but of what true strength means." Marcus met her gaze, sensing the sincerity behind her words. He did not respond immediately, knowing that acknowledgement was enough for now. As evening approached, the palace held a formal gathering in honor of Marcus's efforts. Citizens, nobles, and engineers gathered to celebrate the resolution of the crisis. The atmosphere was different now. Laughter replaced skepticism, admiration replaced mockery. Lysera, standing beside Marcus, addressed the crowd. "Today, we have seen courage, intelligence, and perseverance in a form we did not expect. This human has shown us that strength is not always elegant, and that true skill comes from the mind, the heart, and the will to act." The assembly erupted in applause, the recognition of human achievement echoing across the platforms of Zarathia. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Marcus and Lysera walked together. The twin suns set in brilliant streaks across the floating towers, casting reflections that danced across the delicate bridges and crystalline surfaces. Lysera's usual composure softened further as she spoke. "You have proven yourself in ways I could not have imagined. Your armor may have seemed clumsy, your form unfamiliar, but the essence beneath it, the intelligence, courage, and perseverance, has shown a strength that my people rarely appreciate." Marcus paused, considering her words. "Strength comes in many forms," he said quietly. "What is admired by one society may be overlooked by another. What matters is understanding, adapting, and acting with integrity. That is what I strive to do." Lysera nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. For the first time, she saw him not just as a guest or a curiosity, but as an equal, an individual whose qualities transcended the limitations of appearance and expectation. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and for the first time, they spoke as equals rather than ruler and visitor. Marcus shared stories of Earth's varied landscapes, of human ingenuity, and of challenges faced by his people in survival and exploration. Lysera listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions that revealed both curiosity and a desire to understand his perspective. They spoke of strategy, of observation, and of the subtle ways intelligence and courage manifest in daily life. The bond between them, forged through trials and challenges, grew in strength and mutual respect. As night deepened, the palace gardens glowed with soft bioluminescent light. Marcus removed his helmet, letting the cool alien breeze touch his face. Lysera observed quietly, noting the determination in his eyes, the steadiness in his movements, and the quiet confidence that came not from arrogance but from experience and understanding. She realized that the mockery she had initially entertained was unfounded. This human had demonstrated qualities that transcended societal norms, intelligence, and even physical prowess. Days passed after the incident, and Marcus continued to navigate life in Zarathia. Each challenge, each interaction with Lysera and her court, was met with careful observation, calm adaptation, and steady action. His reputation grew, not as a visitor in clumsy armor, but as a capable, resourceful, and courageous individual whose qualities inspired respect and admiration. The court, once skeptical and amused, now viewed him with cautious reverence. Citizens who had doubted him now saw a human who could face danger, think clearly under pressure, and act decisively for the greater good. Lysera, in particular, experienced a transformation of her own. The princess who had mocked armor and appearances now recognized the depth of character beneath them. She had observed patience, ingenuity, courage, and empathy, the very qualities her society had sometimes overlooked. In Marcus, she had discovered a form of strength that was quiet yet profound, simple yet formidable, human yet universal. She could no longer view him as an outsider. He had earned a place in her understanding of what it meant to be truly strong. The story of Marcus Hale spread across Zarathia. Tales of his actions during the energy crisis, his ability to navigate trials, and his calm, intelligent approach to challenges reached even distant regions of the floating city. Citizens spoke of the human who had arrived awkward and armored, yet had proven that true courage and skill came not from appearances, but from perseverance, observation, and the willingness to act when necessary. One evening, Lysera invited Marcus to the highest terrace of the palace, overlooking the city and the endless expanse of clouds below. The lights shimmered like stars, and the soft hum of the energy fields filled the air. "You have shown us the true meaning of strength," she said, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Not elegance, not ritual, not appearances, but intelligence, courage, and integrity. You have changed the way I see humans, and perhaps even the way my society values these qualities." Marcus looked at her, feeling the weight and sincerity of her words. "I only did what I hoped to do, understand your world, respect it, and act wisely." "That is all any human can do." Lysera's eyes softened further. "And yet you have done more than that. You have shown that strength comes from within, that courage is measured not by how one looks but by what one does, and that intelligence and action together can overcome even the greatest challenges." The wind shifted, carrying a quiet sense of completion and understanding. Between them, for Marcus, the journey had been one of perseverance, adaptation, and courage. He had faced trials, both artificial and real, navigated a society unfamiliar and often unforgiving, and demonstrated qualities that earned respect far beyond the expectations of any observer. For Lysera, the journey had been one of revelation, seeing past appearances, recognizing true strength, and understanding that admiration and respect must be earned through action and character rather than ceremony or tradition. As the twin suns set once more, casting a brilliant reflection across the floating towers, the bond between human and princess was sealed, not by ceremony, nor by armor, nor by mockery, but by mutual respect, understanding, and the recognition of true strength in its many forms. Marcus had entered Zarathia as an outsider, armored and unfamiliar, and had emerged as a figure of courage, intelligence, and integrity. Lysera had entered the day with amusement and skepticism, and emerged with insight, respect, and a new understanding of what it truly meant to be strong. The city of Zarathia shimmered below, alive with light, movement, and the quiet hum of energy fields. Marcus and Lysera stood together, overlooking a world transformed by understanding, courage, and the unexpected power of a human who had dared to face a society that underestimated him. The princess, once quick to mock, now saw the depth of character that had always mattered most. And in that moment, both human and alien understood that appearances were fleeting, but strength, courage, and intelligence were eternal, and that respect, once earned, could transcend worlds.